Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of Dark Souls 3 with me, Guts, and this guy in a tower with what looks like a huge bow. But we'll get to him later. So in this episode we're going to be exploring the Undead Settlement and seeing what kind of delights this undead community has got to offer. So we hear these people looking for handouts? Nope. They're looking for death. So the Undead Settlement doesn't really have a great system to deal with its homeless and immortals. So it looks like they just sick the dogs on them. Can't say I'd recommend that. Because then they tried to sick them on me. On Guts. Didn't go well for them. Time to clean up. Someone should really be controlling these animals. So one thing I really like about Dark Souls 3 is how it can build up atmosphere. You have this entirely strange looking environment. We have all these people facing the same way towards the castle and the end of the bridge. And there's no explanation, there's nothing. And then as you walk around...
Please, grant me death. Undo my shackle.
One of them's still alive. And he's an NPC.
Oh, then it's true. A champion of Ash as I live and breathe. To be in your presence.
I've got to say, I love the voice acting on this guy.
Say, champion of Ash, how does the idea of taking me into your service strike you? I, Yol of Londor, do solemnly swear myself to you.
See, he's a little bit suspicious, but he's also a little bit subversive and submissive. So he's one of those characters we don't really know where he stands. Dark Souls 3 has a great history of making interesting NPCs. See, we have the standard enemy for the Undead Settlement area, this bumbling, useless farmer. But they are quite quick and they hold really big weapons. So now we have the first bonfire of the Undead Settlement. This is rather a large area, so I'm going to try and whip through it as quickly as I can and then get to the boss towards the end of the area. Gonna quickly edit out that journey to Firelink Shrine, where I simply leveled up a few times, got a few more Estus flasks, and chatted with the NPCs. Not really much happened, so now let's continue with the area and see what we can see. Such a delightful sound in the morning of screaming and death. And these people are just common farmers. Very angry about something. So you've got a few outdoor sections, a few indoor sections, and then really open areas like this, where you simply pack it full of enemies. And explosive barrels. Didn't quite get this one though, so gonna have to finish these guys off the old-fashioned way. Luckily the Claymore +1 is more than capable of this job, as it sweeps through these crowds quite nicely. Of course they have strength in numbers, and of course this lady behind them, who is significantly tougher. At least I think it's a lady. I'm really not sure. As you can see, he/she deals a massive amount of bleed damage with her weapon and her spells. Not to mention the huge reach and great speed, but while she's casting, she's quite vulnerable. None of that. Not a big fan of them setting themselves on fire. So we're just gonna whip through this area. Farmers, fire, things. The enemies are placed quite well, but they're fairly easy to cut through. And you've got a bit of a branching path in this section. We've got some bridges and some buildings. We're gonna take the secret paths. We're going to find some enemies from the Berserk series. So we've got this guy here and these guys here. So these are guys you meet during the Conviction arc of the Berserk manga, which is a great read and I would recommend it. As you can see, the enemies based off them are pretty similar, but unfortunately there's quite a lot of them, so I'm just going to mow them down.
Another Nana disappeared.
the ground and carries a cage. He ever has his cage.
And Nana's never coming back. So come into the cage and become Nana's shade.
Some of the NPCs are just plain weird, but what this guy is giving us is a hint to what is happening next.
So come into the cage and become Nana's shade.
The next thing you see is a guy with a cage. So if you just walk up to him, you can get into the grandson's cage and become one of Nana's shades. The first time round I didn't even find this secret, but this is a way to access a special area of the game. The clues leading up to it were quite obscure, but we got there nonetheless. And terribly rudely, he just chucks us in the middle of a hole. So this is where the undead come to be piled up. But we of course came down here of our own accord, because we're completely mad. But there are some really excellent visuals in this. So we can see a man at the end of the lake. Let's see what he's got to say for himself.
Come here to pile up your victims, for that will form your anchor. You'll see when you go mad. They'll be your family. You'll go mad one day, but not today. Take my advice. Use this bone and leave this place. This pit is for hollows, and for the occasional madman fond of piling up victims. You've better things to do, I'd hope.
Right you are, Hodrick. In this case, our better things are to continue with the area. We find some more of these cleric mace ladies. I always seem to have trouble with these, and of course you get a huge amount of bleed build up on the weapon. One more hit and I would have been toast. These projectiles also cause a large amount of bleed build up, but you can just roll straight through them. Or you can do what I do here, and fucking stand right in front of it. Nevertheless, let's carry on. Well, after the end of this path, we find this area here, very gratefully, with a bonfire. But unfortunately, the lovely man we met earlier, in the hole, decides to invade us as a dark, mad spirit. So, let's see if he can make an account of himself. This is, of course, Holy Knight Hodrick, who will give us access. Well, he already gave us access to the Moundmaker's Covenant, but of course he's a madman. So in his one hand, he's here to help. In another hand, he's here to kill you. Which is great, because the helping phantom's always blue, and the killer phantom's always red. So you can see the mad phantoms are a nice mix of purple. Even his spells are mad. He casts a pyromancy which reduces his health, but increases his attack. And then he casts another pyromancy, which heals everything in the area. Of course, what I'm trying to do here is break his shield, but I'm constantly out of range each time. Of course, he can do the same thing to me, so I've got to be very careful. Of course, I've got a two-handed weapon. And then we just got to back him into a corner. As you can see, he casts this pyromancy, which actually starts to heal us both. Which is, of course, completely mad. It's nice to see them back up the character with his actions. I wonder what this summon over here is. Could be a big help. So one of the main enemies from the Conviction arc in Berserk is that guy called Mosgus. And it's great to see there are still other people out there in the Dark Souls 3 community cosplaying as Berserk characters. So instead of going to the secret area beyond the bridge here, we're going to go straight through and see what else is waiting for us in this area. It's some crows. It's nice of them to put the exploding barrels right next to people throwing firebombs. So we're just going to get underneath them That's where we find our third bonfire of the area. So of course we've got to go back up there and kill them all, in response to them trying to get us with their firebombs. And here we meet another very interesting NPC.
Aha, unkindled, are we? Welcome to my abode. I am Cornix, an old pyromancer. A crow in his cage, as you see now. But here we are, an encounter for the ages. I hear the unkindled make for fine vessels. Care to learn some pyromancies from this old man? Ah, most wise.
Of course, we definitely want the pyromancies. Guts will later use a hand cannon, and the best approximation we can get of this is the combustion spells. Below this tower, of course, is another enemy wielding a giant pot, and I seem to get trapped underneath it every single time. Because these enemies have got a ridiculous amount of hyper armor. I can attack him, but he won't be able to stop his attack. And in this way, I get smashed with this big pot of meat repeatedly. But they can't keep it up forever. Of course, they love to make a big dramatic death. But if we go beyond them, we'll find this area. We're going to avoid them for now. If we go through here, we'll find the sewers. But fucking... I don't know why, but I always seem to have trouble with these dogs in these areas. Now, if we go through the sewer, we'll find a number of really useful shortcuts. But unfortunately, the sewer is also home to a number of rats, which are a staple enemy of Dark Souls. And unfortunately, we're annoying as hell in every single one. But only if you're wielding a massive sword and you've got to wait between swings like me. Now here we find a great weapon for Guts. This is the Kestus. Kestus? Cestus? It's a fist weapon. So Guts is well known to punch things in the face. And we need something to put in our left hand so that we can parry. While we can't use a shield, we can definitely use the cestus like this. And if we wanted, we can also just put away the sword and beat something up the old-fashioned way. Let's continue into the sewer. Of course, you've got to wonder why they put up a giant cloud of obscuring fog like this. So you've got to take things nice and gingerly. Lure a couple of rats out of the mist. Of course, the giant rat is another staple of Dark Souls 3. In the classic video game sense of, you get a normal enemy, let's just make it a hell of a lot bigger. Luckily, they're just as easy to kill, and it gives you a great ring. The whole point of doing this, of course, is to get a shortcut to the bonfire where we fought Hodrick just earlier. So, let's continue. We've got a giant stone arch and all these stakes sticking into the ground. It's a great setup for what we saw earlier. The game forces you to be good at putting 2 and 2 together, and you can see the arrows being fired. Sorry, we got interrupted. You can see the arrows being fired, and you can try to dodge them, but as you can see, I'm not very good. Or maybe. So you gotta run through this whole area while dodging the arrows and killing the enemies. And then of course it brings you onto this, which is a room with a giant tree. I mean, you can see it clipping through the top of that building there, so you can tell it's going to start moving around. Of course, the best thing for fighting wooden creatures is fire. So we're going to put all this fire on our sword, and we're going to fight the Curse-Rotted Greatwood. The main way to fight this guy is to attack all his balls. Yeah, as ridiculous as this may sound, there's some truth in it. His weakness is his balls. So once we break open his balls, quite rightfully he gets pissed. You can see the balls all over his body, his back, hands, knees, thighs, everywhere. And he'll only lose health if you break the balls open. So you've literally got to bust the balls of this guy to beat him. We're just going to ignore the giant hand spurting out of his chest, and we're going to focus on the balls on his arm and his back. Just caught them on the edge there. He reacts quite a lot. Back of his heel, beautiful. There's a big recoil every time you hit him. There's a few more left, but I think if we burst the ones where his real testicles are, naturally this guy can regrow his testicles, which is the biggest question for me. Let alone the giant hands coming out of it. Just got to slash away at his balls a few more times, and then he'll be good to go. He can even put down this acid, but we're guts. He'll kill his enemy at any cost, even standing in a pile of acid that would break his equipment. So, as before, you've got to give honour to your enemy, but not too much. Because of course the game will punish you for just standing in front of his balls, which is why the second phase of the hand coming out makes a great change. So, we had fun with you, Curse-Rotted Greatwood, but it's time to put you out of your obvious misery. So let's slice your balls open. A more fitting death I could not imagine. So this is an optional boss, which we don't actually need to fight, but it gives you the transponing kiln, which is a great item for later in the game. You may notice that we're in the same pit where we met Hodrick, and unfortunately, he's not doing so hot right now. I've been Malphus64. This has been Dark Souls 3 with Guts, and I'll see you next time. You have a nice day.